Hi everyone! In video 2, we have learned about the qualities of an ESP test. Now we move on to focus on different options of test tasks the test designers may use in such a test. In this video, I categorize these options into two task types. 1. Selected response, including true, false, matching, and multiple choice assessments. And 2. Constructed response, including fill-in and short answer assessments. The primary aim of this video is to disseminate the advantages and disadvantages of each task type, with a view to helping test designers make informed choice of tasks to include in their ESP tests. Let's start with selected response assessment. Selected response assessments present test takers with language materials and require them to choose the correct answer from among a limited set of options. In selected response assessments, test takers typically do not create any language. Thus, these assessments are most appropriate for measuring receptive skills such as listening and reading. In general, selected response assessments are relatively quick to administer. In addition, scoring them is relatively fast, easy, and relatively objective. However, these assessments have two disadvantages. They are relatively difficult for the test writer to construct, and they do not require test takers to use any productive language. Three types of selected response assessments are commonly used: true, false, matching, and multiple choice. First, let's talk about true-false assessment. True-false assessments present a sample of language and require the test takers to respond to that language by selecting one of two choices, true or false. The primary strength of true-false assessments is that they focus on the test taker's ability to select the correct answer from two alternatives. Thus, true-false assessments provide simple and direct indications of whether a particular point has been understood. One problem with true-false assessments is that, in order to produce items that discriminate well, test writers may be tempted to write items that are tricky. That is, that turn on to the meaning of a single word or phrase, or that depend on some ambiguity. Most teachers prefer to create straightforward assessments, wherein test takers who know the answer get it correct, and test takers who do not know the answer get it wrong. The relatively large guessing factor is another problem for true-false assessments. In fact, the examinee have a 50% chance of answering correctly even if they do not know the answer. However, if a large number of carefully designed true-false items are used, the overall score should overcome much of the guessing factor's influence. If the language knowledge or skills a teacher wants to test lend themselves to two-way choices and enough items can be written, true-false items may turn out to be useful. However, because true-false assessments tend to place emphasis on details and unimportant facts, it may be difficult to find 25 non-trivial points to assess, and for example, a listening or a reading passage. Now we are going to move on to matching. Matching assessment presents test takers with two lists of words or phrases, from which they must select the words or phrases in one list that match the ones in the other list. The main advantages of matching assessments are that they are relatively compact in terms of space and have a low guessing factor. For instance, only 10% for 10 items if extra options are supplied. Matching assessment is generally restricted to measuring test takers' ability to associate one set of facts with another, which in language testing usually means measuring passive vocabulary knowledge. That is, the test taker's ability to match definitions to vocabulary items. Multiple-choice assessments require test takers to examine a sample of language material and select the answer that best completes a sentence or best fills in a blank in the sentence from among a set of 3, 4, or 5 options. Multiple-choice assessment, like matching assessment, has the advantages of a relatively small guessing factor, whereas true-false assessment has a 50% guessing factor. Multiple-choice assessment typically has a 33%, 25%, or 20 guessing factors, depending on whether there are 3, 4, or 5 options. Multiple-choice assessment also have the advantage of being useful for measuring a fairly wide variety of different kinds of precise learning points. Multiple-choice assessments are frequently criticized by language teachers because real-life language is not multiple choice. In truth, authentic productive language use rarely offers options from which speaker can select. So, avoiding the use of multiple-choice assessment or true, false, or matching assessment for that matter, for measuring productive skills like writing and speaking is just common sense. Nonetheless, many aspects of language, particularly the receptive skills, can be tested using multiple-choice assessment. Testing reading, listening, grammar knowledge, and phoneme discrimination with multiple-choice items can provide useful information about test takers' ability or knowledge in those areas with relative efficiency. Unfortunately, because reading, listening, and grammar skills are often the only assessment measures on the commonly used proficiency and placement tests, multiple-choice assessments have often been overused. Look at it in reverse. The pervasive use of multiple-choice items, usually because of ease of administration and scoring as well as objectivity, may often have limited the types of language skills that were tested in reading, listening, and grammar. In addition, multiple-choice items have sometimes been twisted to uses that seem quite inappropriate. For instance, multiple-choice assessment of writing ability. The second task type is constructed response assessments. Constructed response assessment require test takers to produce language by writing, speaking, or doing something. Hence, these assessments are probably most appropriate for measuring the productive skills of speaking and writing. These assessments can also be used for observing interaction of receptive and productive skills. For instance, the interaction of listening and speaking in an oral interview procedure, or the interaction of reading and writing in a performance assessment in which test takers read 2 academic articles and write an essay, compare them and contrasting them. There are certain trade-offs in deciding whether to use selected response or constructed response assessments. For example, selected response items allow for some guessing, but they are relatively objective. On the other hand, constructed response items eliminate some of the guessing factor, but create problem of subjectivity, especially when human judgment get involved in deciding what is the correct answer for a blank or short answer, or when raters score the language samples. The guessing factor is less of the problem on constructed response assessments. However, they are not completely immune from guessing. Those guessing on constructed response assessments might better be called bluffing. For example, On the composition examinations, some test takers may try to use keywords in the prompt to write around the topic or take a shotgun approach to answering in the hope of hitting something that will be counted as correct. Although this is a type of guessing, it is guessing that scorers or raters can see if they are alert to its possibility. In general, constructed response assessment have virtually no guessing factor, and they measure productive language use as well as the interaction of receptive and productive skills. However, bluffing is a possible problem, and scoring may be relatively difficult and time-consuming. Constructed response assessments may also be fairly subjective depending on the type. 3 types of constructed response assessments are commonly used in language testing are fill-in, short answer, and performance assessments. Fill-in assessment give a language context with part of the context removed and replaced with a blank. To answer this, test takers are required to fill in the blank. Fill-in assessment comes in many shapes and forms, from single-word fill-in items in single sentence to closed passage with many blanks embedded in a longer stretch of text. Fill-in assessment have the advantages that they are fairly easy to construct, are flexible in what they can assess, and are quick to administer. Moreover, like the other constructed response types, fill-in assessment measure the test taker's ability to actually produce the language, obey small amounts of language, and open up the possibility of assessing interaction between receptive and productive skills. For example, in a listening clause, test takers must listen to a passage while reading it and fill in the blanks. One limitation to fill-in assessment is that it is generally very narrowly focused on testing a single word or short phrase at most. Another problem is that the blank to fill in may have a number of possible answers. Short answer assessment requires the test takers to scrutinize a question or statement and respond it with one or more phrases or sentences. The advantages of short answer assessments are that they are easy to produce and are relatively quick to administer. One disadvantage of short assessments, however, is that they focus on assessing a few phrases or sentences. A second disadvantage is that multiple answers are possible, which means that if the prompts are not carefully crafted, a student may produce a completely different answer. Performance assessment requires test takers to accomplish approximations of real-life, authentic tasks, usually using the productive skills of speaking or writing, but also use reading or writing or combining skills. Performance assessments can take many forms, including very traditional tasks like essay writing or interviews, or more recent developments like problem-solving tasks, communicative pairword tasks, role-playing, and group discussions. In short, by definition, the performance assessment has 3 requirements. 1. Examinees are required to perform some sort of task. 2. The task must be as authentic as possible. And 3. The performances are typically scored by qualified raters. The principal advantages of performance assessments is that they can come close to eliciting authentic communication, at least insofar as authentic communication can be elicited in any testing situation. Advocates of performance assessment maintain that performance assessment provide more valid measures of test takers' ability to respond to real-life language tasks. Estimates of test takers' true language ability than traditional standardized multiple-choice assessments. and predictions of test takers' future performances in real-life language situations. Performance assessments can also be used to counteract the negative washback effects of standardized testing, like bias and irrelevant content. In fact, well-designed performance assessments can provide strong positive washback effects, especially if they are directly linked to a particular curriculum. Performance assessments are relatively difficult to produce and relatively time-consuming to administer. Considerable costs that may also be incurred in developing performance assessments, administering them, training raters, conducting rating section, reporting scores, and so on. Still, another disadvantage is that logistics involve a number of complex issues like collecting and storing audio or video tapes of the performances, provide special equipment and security, and planning and conducting rating sections. Reliability may be problematic because of greater inconsistencies, limited numbers of observations, subjectivity in scoring process, and so on. Validity may also be problematic because of inadequate content coverage, lack of construct generalizability, the sensitivity of performance assessments to test method, task time, and scoring criteria. Construct underrepresentation, that is, the problem of generalizing from a few observations to the whole spectrum of real-life performances. And construct irrelevant variance, that is, the performance characteristics that have nothing to do with the test taker's real abilities. Test security may also be problematic because of a small number of prompts. Each prompt may be very easy for examinee to remember and pass on to the others. The difficulty of creating and equating new prompts for each administration and the potential effects of teaching to the test.